your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks so much for joining us for a look at what made headlines in Alberta this past week. 4 years after the fact, the debate continues over whether or not airlines owe refunds to passengers who have had their flights canceled during the COVID-19 pandemic. A recent Canadian Transportation Agency ruling found a couple was not entitled to a refund because they chose to cancel their 2020 booking for a flight that the airline had already canceled. In a confidential decision obtained by the Canadian Press, a complaints resolution officer with the CTA said the two passengers qualified for nothing more than a voucher. However, WestJet's policies at the time stated in the event of disruptions outside the carrier's control, customers who decline another travel option would be refunded. WestJet has not responded to requests for comment on this story. And speaking of WestJet, the airline announced effective October 27th it will go from offering 3 flights a day to just a single daily flight between Lethbridge and Calgary and Medicine Hat and Calgary. The company says the change is in line with their regional growth strategy. Director of Corporate Services with the city, Jason Elliott, gives his thoughts on the economic impact of the reduction of flights in and out of the Windy City.
The good news, I guess, is the airplane that will be used is a larger airplane. It's a 78 passenger capacity airplane as opposed to the 34 seats that are on our current flights. The schedule that WestJet has proposed, which residents and customers can look at online effective immediately, indicates that it's an early morning flight and returning to Lethbridge late in the day, again around that midnight time frame, which allows for connections to be made.
The city's new cycling lanes will remain in place in Lethbridge. City officials say construction will resume on the 7th Street portion of the lanes from 4th Avenue to 7th Avenue South. Ever since the lanes were opened last fall, there has been a lot of contention about them. But in a 8-1 vote, City Council approved a motion to keep them, which has downtown cyclists rejoicing.
The first time I broke 3 different places in my face, and I have 3 metal plates and 13 screws.
This former downtown cyclist named Tom is describing the condition he was left in after being hit by a car on 2 separate occasions while biking.
And the second time I broke my whole left hand. I got fired over it because I had to miss so much work.
He says since the downtown bike lanes have been installed, it's made it much safer for cyclists. Keelan Schulten has been a cycling enthusiast for years. He says these days his bike is his main mode of transportation.
I cycle all year round. My bike is very good on gas. Anytime I'm getting around town, I'll use my bike. You know, if it's really miserable, I might catch the bus, but mostly it's the bike.
On May 14th, Lethbridge City Council voted 8-1 in favor of keeping the lanes while agreeing to have administration monitor bike lane usage, safety, and modifications to address other issues that may arise, and then report these findings back to the Standing Policy Committee in summer of 2025 and again in 2026. Council cited part of their reason to keep the lanes going was the feedback they received from the public during the April 25th Community Conversations event held at NMAC Center, where they had an information booth set up specifically about bike lanes.
And it's been nice that some of the concerns that we're hearing about are some of the concerns that have been addressed already. So we have the snow clearing, which we've changed our operations in how the bike lanes get cleared. And we've also are still hearing about the accessibility issues. So we've taken out a few of the concrete blocks so that we could improve access to the adjacent businesses and such.
That, as well as the May 2nd Standing Policy Committee meeting, where they heard from several members of the public, both for and against bike lanes.
We don't need to have bike lanes, in my opinion, and I feel that bike lanes can give cyclists a false sense of security.
What the bicycle paths have done for me is allowed me to take my daughter downtown by bike.
I question how many people are these catering to 1,000 people, 2,000 people? How much was the cost to do this.
Council's motion also approved the extension of the construction on the 7th Street lanes from 4th Avenue to 7th Avenue South. That will begin later this month. The impending construction on the street has business owners like Paige concerned for her walk-in business.
The construction is going to be a huge pain. We are a walk-in business, obviously. Being a tattoo shop, we are, like, a lot of people do walk-in, spur of the moment kind of thing, so it's really frustrating to have construction.
As a cycling community in Lethbridge, I want to make sure people are getting out and supporting these businesses.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche. After the break, the wildfire burning outside Fort McMurray has seen a bit of a reprieve with the rain. We'll be right back with more about that. Rain has helped in the Fort McMurray area as thousands of people remain away from home because of a nearby forest fire. Alberta Wildfire says showers on Thursday and Friday helped to lower fire activity and allowed firefighters to make progress. As of Friday, the wildfire remained about 200 square kilometers in size and under 6 kilometers from the landfill that's just outside city limits. Residents from the 4 neighborhoods under an evacuation order are not expected to be allowed back until after the long weekend. Alberta Health Services offered some tips to protect yourself and your loved ones from the wildfire smoke. They say those who are most vulnerable, including folks with COPD and asthma, should limit their activity outdoors and keep a close eye on the worsening of symptoms. If you drive, run your car fan on recirculate mode to avoid drawing in the outdoor air. AHS says if you're having health issues as a result of the poor air quality, to call a registered nurse 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by simply dialing 811. The province says it's restructuring AHS and creating 4 new organizations. They will be for primary care, acute care, continuing care, and mental health and addiction. The UCP says if passed, the Health Statuses Amendment Act would allow the government to take the next steps to refocus the provincial healthcare system. They say the changes will cut down on long waits for urgent care and help Albertans find a primary care provider.
The amendments proposed in this act are not just bureaucratic changes. They represent a fundamental shift in how we approach healthcare in Alberta. By updating legislation to enable better governance and oversight of healthcare, we are laying the foundation for a stronger, unified provincial healthcare delivery system.
Well, the field to replace Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley just got a little smaller. Union boss Gil McGowan is bowing out. He said the final installment of the $60,000 entrance fee is too high. That leaves 4 candidates to replace Notley on June 22nd. They are former Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi, Edmonton MLAs Sarah Hoffman and Jody Calahoo Stonehouse, and Calgary MLA Kathleen Ganley. A total of 85,144 members are eligible to vote in our province's next NDP leadership race. The party's chief returning officer, Amanda Freistad, says this will be the largest number of NDP members in Alberta's history who will be voting. Ballots will be sent out at the end of the month, and voting will begin on June 3rd. Tyler Dawson is our legislative reporter and Alberta correspondent for the National Post. He joined Hal Roberts from Edmonton to discuss the province's NDP leadership race following McGowan's announcement this week.
Tyler, is this race still Naheed Nenshi's to lose?
Out of those 4, I do think it's fair to say that Naheed Nenshi is still the front runner in this race. One of the most important things, or one of the most significant things, is quite simply name recognition, and Nenshi has that in a way that nobody else does. Gil McGowan's been around for a long time. He was, I think, 19 years as the leader of the Alberta Federation of Labour. Been in the news a fair bit, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's all that well known across the province. That doesn't mean he's necessarily all that well known among NDP membership. But some of the polling has showed that Nenshi is known, compared to the other candidates, quite well across the province. And that's just not the case really for anyone else. That doesn't mean there wouldn't be a significant and serious challenge to Nenshi's leadership. And of course, polling tends to capture everybody. It doesn't capture just NDP members. So Gantley or someone like that might be a little bit more popular among NDP members. It's really hard to poll down to that level, unless it's sort of internal party polling. So I do think it's fair to say Nenshi's the front runner at this point still. Gil McGowan obviously narrows the field a little bit. Probably not a whole heck of a lot if we're being totally frank about it, but the race continues. I think about 5 weeks left, give or take, and then we'll find out who's replacing Rachel Notley.
Did Gil McGowan announce who he's throwing his support behind after he withdrew his name?
No, I don't think he did actually. Pancholi, when she pulled out, had said that she was going to back Nenshi, I believe. And that matters a lot in some cases, especially if you have sort of down to 3 candidates and you have a pretty big split in membership numbers. Now, I would suspect that if McGowan couldn't raise the money necessary, that means he didn't actually probably sign up tons and tons and tons of members and probably didn't have a massive amount of backing. So let's say he throws his support behind someone. That doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a whole lot of people moving one way or the other to influence the outcome of this race.
We will hear more from legislative reporter and Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, coming up later in the show. On the other side of the break, though, will there be a rail strike? And what could that mean for the province? We'll be right back. Welcome back. Premier Danielle Smith shared her concerns about a possible rail stoppage and what it could mean for Alberta's economy. In a media release, Smith raised concerns about the decision by workers at CN and CPKC, who announced their vote results to authorize strikes at both companies. Unless an agreement can be reached, a work stoppage could occur as early as May 22nd. Smith says that a work stoppage would shut down Canadian logistics networks, disrupting the movement of essential goods throughout North America. She goes on to say that the government of Canada must do everything in its power to support the parties in reaching negotiated settlements. She says our freight railways and ports are the veins of Canada's economy. In 2023, Alberta exported $20.1 billion in goods by rail, including minerals, agriculture, and forestry products. Well, the City of Calgary is making a major change to its housing laws. City Council voted for zoning changes that will allow for a higher density housing in the areas where only single detached homes were allowed. The vote follows weeks of contentious public hearings, with around 75% of residents speaking out against the zoning change. A Calgary real estate broker says depending upon what side of the fence you're on, the zoning changes could be bad or good for the city.
The big thing that's happening in our city is you have a lot of people who are for this, we have a lot of people who are against this. And those that are for it are really looking for future growth. I mean, the city is growing quickly and there's a lot of things that are changing. And those that are against it, they really want to preserve what they've already built. And so there's this dynamic that's happening in the city that I truly believe only time will tell, because it really does depend on the reactions and what happens in our city moving forward.
In other news, a North America-wide road check campaign got underway for truckers this week. The Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance organized a safety inspection blitz. Now here in Alberta, the annual event saw members of the Alberta Sheriff Highway Patrol inspect hundreds of additional commercial vehicles and their drivers for compliance with federal and provincial regulations at vehicle inspection stations throughout Alberta.
Overall, we're supportive of it. I mean, some people don't like it. You get pulled over, you get held up and things like that at different scales and everything. But overall, our focus is on safety. And we value that, because when we get a safety, when we get that inspection and we get passed with flying colors, it goes on our company profile, which is available on a website. So if someone wants to hire our company, they can look on that website and say, oh, wait a minute, this guy's got a bad safety record, so maybe I'll hire somebody else. The province announced more funding to help end gender-based violence.
Social Services Minister Cyril Turton says his government's commitment of $10 million over the next few years to sexual assault centers will help survivors receive the help and compassionate care they need.
We've also committed an additional $10 million for women's shelters to help stabilize capacity and support innovative programs and services. And our work doesn't just end there. With funds through the National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence, Children and Family Services launched the Prevention of Family Violence campaign. This campaign, and you'll see the posters next to me, is aimed at increasing awareness of the Family Violence Info Line, as well as the supports we have for survivors, their loved ones, and those struggling with abusive behaviors who want to change. A First Nations college said that their students held a sharing circle to talk about the campaign.
Within the framework of Sexual Violence Awareness Month, Chinook Sexual Assault Center in Lethbridge will hold workshops and educational activities for the community and its workers. Christine Cassie, the group's CEO, says there are a number of planned activities for young people specifically.
In the province of Alberta, that they've dedicated the month of May as Sexual Violence Awareness Month. So we have several activities going on. Now at the Crossings at Branch Library, we just have some engagement activities for young people to partake in that actually talk about issues of consent. What is consent? What are some of the roles and responsibilities we have when it comes to digital images? So when things are being shared and what privacy means. I think it's been about 500 people that we've been able to reach, so that's been really good. And so again, we know that information is power. The more information that we can get out there, the more education that can happen around issues of sexual abuse and sexual assault, the more that we can actually create that change to actually have that end in our society.
One of the programs for the CSAC is dedicated to giving children and youth who have experienced sexual and emotional abuse a safe space to receive the support and resources they need throughout the entire disclosure, investigation, and judicial process. Well, on the other side of the break, there's been a lot of talk about potential drought conditions in the province. So what's been done about it? We look at what the different municipalities are doing next. Stay with us. Welcome back. Even though we have seen a bit of rain lately, it's still been quite a dry spring. The province has been preparing for a potential drought this summer, though, and a major water sharing agreement was announced just last month. But will it be enough? To discuss this in more detail, here once again is political reporter and Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, who joined Hal Roberts from Edmonton.
That's sort of what the water sharing agreement is designed to address. Now, there's 5 stages to the water management drought sort of situation. If we get to stage 5, we're in a state of emergency. At this point, we're in a stage 4. So this is the point where, there are risks posed to agriculture, to livestock, to the economy, obviously, if there's going to be crop failures, things like that. So we're at the point where the government's been talking about this for months. They've been in negotiations since about, I think, late January is when they started on water sharing agreements. And what that amounts to basically is along the river basin, sort of in southern Alberta, you have various water holders. And so some of the biggest license holders, the ones that get to take the most water, so they've basically agreed to voluntarily use the minimum necessary to make sure that there's water for other users. And municipalities, we've seen some voluntarily. For example, Calgary has said they're not going to be washing municipal vehicles as much to try and save water. These are the sort of things that are happening across the province. You have irrigation districts, for example, setting lower rates of irrigation for some farmers in their districts, which, less than previous years, so not ideal for farmers, but enough to try and make sure there's enough to go around. Now, there's also a much larger water management plan that the government has released. So this has actually it's been really front of mind for the UCP for the last several months. I mean, I think not that many people maybe pay attention to water and water usage and things like that, but it is something that the government has very, very actively been keeping an eye on as reservoir levels have been very low. There's not been that much snow over the winter. Certainly, as you mentioned, the rain is going to help. But it's sort of unlikely that it's even possible to see enough rain to sort of get us back to where we might want to be, or where we would have been a couple of years ago. The sponge of the sort of water system in Alberta has dried out quite a bit over the last couple of years.
Wow. Tyler, the province also announced a new committee to study ways to really clean up tailings ponds more quickly. Now, the ponds are hazardous leftover water from the oil sands extraction process, and many would argue pose a significant environmental hazard.
Yeah, and obviously these are the images that don't do great for Alberta's PR internationally when photos of tailings ponds go around and activists talk about it. So there has been this committee that's been struck to study the issue. Not really much of a timeline on when they're planning to report back, but certainly, you know, these are, and they're often, you know, in the vicinity of environmentally significant areas or delicate areas and things like that. Of course, there have been stories over the years of tailings ponds leaking into water, into rivers, and things like that. So, you know, it's a big PR thing in addition to being, you know, a genuine problem for the environment, a genuine problem for industry. So this committee aims to, you know, what are some of the ways this can be dealt with more quickly to prevent their further expansion and things like that. And so, you know, a little bit controversial in the sense that you do have some environmental activists saying, well, look, you know, this has been studied for years and years and years. We have ideas on what to do. Perhaps the issue is that there just needs to be more effort into doing it. So, you know, I don't imagine this is going to be a massive controversy, but it certainly will be interesting to see what the committee comes up with when they report back down the line when it comes to the tailings ponds, because, of course, the oil sands industry is not going anywhere anytime soon, and that means neither are the tailings ponds until some sort of cleanup is started.
Tyler, the UCP also announced that they're looking into expanding rail service in our province, including an Edmonton to Calgary rail line, which would be kind of cool, and a train that would run out to Banff and Jasper. Now, the study alone, however, is going to cost taxpayers around $9 million. Now, what would a project like that potentially cost? How many billions of dollars? And will we see even a referendum on it?
There's been no word on a referendum. At this point, basically, they had this sort of vision. Premier Danielle Smith is a fan of this idea, and so they're going to be doing this feasibility study, as you say, a $9 million study. Now, I went right down in the weeds of Alberta's history with passenger rail studies. It's happened a pile of times: 1976, 1985, 1986, 1985, 2004, 2008, 2010, 2014 were the years that this has previously been studied. And obviously it has not happened. We have not had intercity rail transit since the Dayliner shut down between Edmonton and Calgary in 1986. So there's a long history of this. We've tried thinking about it, talking about it. Shovels have never gotten in the ground. Will it be different this time? You know, who knows? But the possibility here is that there could be shovels in the ground as early as 2027.
Still to come in our show, Lethbridge residents about to get a huge property tax hike, and we tell you about the upcoming hike for life. All that next, but first, a quick break. Every year in Canada, approximately 100,000 abortions take place, which is the equivalent of 10 classrooms of children disappearing each day of the year. It's a jarring number, but should Canadians be concerned about it? Up next, BCN's Naveen Day speaks with a local teen who is concerned. She discusses how she's part of her school's ARPA club, which means Association for Reformed Political Action. Take a look.
The ARPA Club is a bunch of high school kids who get together to take political action, and our job is to equip and educate the public about abortion and other political matters.
And what has been your experience with other kids your age outside of your school?
I was recently in Calgary, and we went on the streets and we talked to a bunch of people who were just walking by, and many of the young people didn't actually have much of an opinion on abortion, especially the young guys. If you talk to a teenager, a young male teenager, they didn't really know what they thought, so it was easy to show them the problems with abortion. While the young girls, they mostly had a strong pro-choice stance on abortion.
And Dwayne, where are we at in Canada right now? Are attitudes toward abortion changing, or are they remaining the same?
Well, I think attitudes are starting to change. Certainly, it's an issue that continues to be front and center in the media. We still have, like you said earlier, 100,000 abortions a year, which is a real tragedy. And We're very excited to see young people like Dana and other young people mobilizing to make a difference on this issue. The only way that this is going to change is having the next generation stand up, recognizing that life has value from conception until natural death, and be willing to make a stand on that and then get involved politically carrying out their faith. I'm very encouraged that here in Lethbridge, we have a large youth portion of Lethbridge and District Pro-Life. Here at our school, we have 30 kids involved in the local ARPA club. So that's encouraging. And hopefully that can kind of swing the tide for people to recognize that all people have value, even if they're in their mother's womb.
And we're talking about a very divisive issue here. Why do you think so many Canadians are unsure about their feelings toward abortion? Is it likely most people just don't give much thought to this, or is it a lack of knowledge? Is it because we don't believe the fetus is a human being?
Well, I think it's a combination of all of those things. Certainly our job as Lethbridge and District Pro-Life and as pro-life people across the country is to educate people that the unborn are human. And so there's a lot of people that believe the unborn is just a glob of cells or something, other than human. But when we think about it scientifically, logically, human parents get together, they have human children. And so the unborn from the time of conception are human. Once people realize that, then usually it's pretty quick for them to jump fully on board the pro-life movement, that then all people have value. So you're partly right, people are indifferent or they haven't thought about it, but once the issue is set before them and they actually think about it, it makes sense that all people have value and that we need to stand up for them.
Now, let's talk about your annual Hike for Life that is coming up on Saturday, June 8th. Can you share some details as to the start time, where to meet, and what will be taking place and what donations will be going towards?
Absolutely. So thank you for bringing that up. So the annual Hike for Life is held on Saturday, June 8th. It's at the Kiwanis Shelter at Henderson Lake. Starts at 9 a.m. in the morning and it goes till about noon. This is really a celebration of life. We believe that people have value from conception until natural death. So we're going to celebrate life on that day. As I said earlier, we do a lot of different things in pro-life. We certainly educate, we put out advertising, we protest, we pray. But on this day, we celebrate life. And so people can come, there's no fee, it's free. They come, there's games for the kids, there's face painting, there's balloons, there's food, there's drink, there's free t-shirts for everybody. And we want you to come and celebrate life. But not only do we want people come, there are people that get sponsors to come and donate on the day towards Elsie's House, towards our staff, and towards our programs. And so it's our biggest fundraiser of the year. It usually raises over $60,000 towards our programs. And so it's a great day. We get 300-400 people out. And again, we love you to raise money for it, but we'd also just like you to come and celebrate life with us on that day. It's a really fun event.
Dwayne Kneinenbelt is with the Lethbridge and District Pro-Life Association, and Dana Van Kamen is involved in the Coaldale Christian School ARPA Club. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Still to come, getting through a drug or alcohol addiction is a difficult journey that might give someone reason to celebrate their recovery. After the break, we examine a 12-step program with that very name right here in Lethbridge.